hermaphrodite. That is, it has both the male and the female organs on the same flower. Then you say a flower is unisexual flower when it has either stamens or carpels. That is, it has just the male part or the female part. You say it is unisexual flower. Then a flower is staminate when it has only stamens. So staminate, unisexual flower can be staminate or pistillate. When it is staminate, it has only stamens. When it is pistillate, it has only carpels. Then a flower is monoecious when it has both staminate and pistillate flowers borne on the same plant. So you have the staminate flower and pistillate flower on the same plant. You say the flower is monoecious, just as we have in maize and castor oil plants. So the flower of maize and castor oil plants is monoecious because it has both staminate and pistillate flower borne on the same plant. But you say a flower is dioecious flower when it has its pistillate flowers and the staminate flowers borne on separate plants, just as we have in pawpaw plants. It has the pistillate flower on one plant, it has the staminate flower on another plant. So you say pawpaw is a dioecious flower. Then you say a plant has a superior ovary when the sepals, the petals, and the stamens are inserted at the base of the ovary where it joins to the flower stalk. The sepals, petals, and stamens are inserted at the base of the ovary where it joins the flower. And example, you have the tomato and orange plant having a superior ovary. But also we have inferior ovary when the sepals, petals, and stamens rise above the ovary. So the stamens, petals, and petals they are above the ovary. So we say that the ovary is inferior because the ovary is below the stamens, petals, and sepals. But when the ovary is above the stamen, petals, and sepals, you say the ovary is superior. So examples of plants with inferior ovary, we have guava and banana. Then inflorescence is a collection of flowers sharing common stalks. Inflorescence is a collection of flowers. They are flowers, but they share common stalks. So the stalks are joined together. And examples we have in buttercup flower, in maize plant, and in commelina. Then another term used in describing flower, you say actinomorphic. When you say a particular flower is actinomorphic or radially symmetrical, it means that the flower parts are arranged in a regular shape such that when you cut through the center of the plant in any direction, it produces two similar arcs. So it means that the flower parts are even in number when you say it is actinomorphic, that is radially symmetrical. So it means that the flower part, maybe they have 6 parts or 4 or 8. So when you divide the plant into 2 from any direction at all, it produces 2 similar halves. So they are equal on both sides. An example, you have it in rose periwinkle flower. Then you say a flower is zygomorphic or bilaterally symmetrical in nature when the flower parts are arranged in an irregular shape, such that when you cut through the center, it produces 2 similar halves in only one direction. You can't cut it through in every direction, just as you have in actinomorphic to have 2 similar halves. It's only in one direction. If you don't cut it through that one direction, then it won't have similar direction and similar halves. So you have such examples in crotalaria and pea plants or pea flower. Now we'll be talking about placentation. Placentation is the arrangement of ovules on the placenta within the ovary. The placenta is a part of the ovary where the ovules originate and remains attached there until maturity. So the arrangement of the ovules on the placenta is what we call placentation. And this arrangement of ovules on the placenta within the ovary varies from plant to plant depending on the number of carpels that there are in the plant. You know, we talked about monocarpous, polycarpous, and the likes. Then also depends whether the carpels are free or they are fused. So those are the factors that determine the kind of placentation that you have in a particular plant. So it tells you that the placentation, you will find it in the fruit, because the fruit is the one that contains the ovules within the ovary. The various types of placentation, we'll be looking at them one by one. The first we'll be considering is marginal. In marginal placentation, the ovules are arranged along the fused edges of a single carpel. The ovules are arranged along the fused edges of a single carpel. Then the ovary has one chamber. This is the diagrammatic representation of the placentation. And one other thing I want you to know, a practical tip about placentation, is that you know the type of placentation when you cut, you give a section to a fruit. When you cut it at the center, that is where you can see the placentation. For instance, from this picture, you see the fruit the tomato plant being cut into two in the hand of this person in the picture. So that is how you know the placentation. The arrangement of the ovules on the placenta within the ovary. You can see the arrangement of the ovules there. So that is how you know which kind of placentation this fruit has or the other. So talking back about the marginal placentation, the ovary has one chamber, and example you find in cassia, we have in crotalaria. Then the plant called pride of Barbados, we also have marginal placentation in them. Then the second type of placentation we have is periatal, and in this case the carpels are fused only by their margins. They are fused only by their margins. Then the ovules are borne on the ovary walls of the syncarpous ovary. The ovary has one chamber, and an example of a plant that has the periatal placentation, you have pawpaw. So when you dissect pawpaw, you see this kind of placentation in it. It's called periatal. Then the third kind of placentation that we'll be talking about is what we call axial placentation. In axial placentation, the margins of carpels fold inwards, fusing together in the center to form a single central placenta. The ovules are arranged on the syncarpous ovary. Then the ovary has more than one chamber. Can you see? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have about 5 chambers in this diagram. And an example you find in tomato. Also you find in your orange. When you cut orange into two, you can easily get axial placentation. When you just get an orange, cut it into two, you discover that the kind of placentation you have is the axial placentation, as well as you have in your tomato plant. Then the last kind of placentation I'll be talking about is what we call the free central placentation. The placenta arises as a central outgrowth from the ovary base. Look at it at the center. Central outgrowth of the ovary base. Then the column does not extend to the top of the ovary. For example, we have in primrose, and another example you have in talinum, that is your water leaf. When you get the fruit of water leaf, you find this kind of placentation in it. It's called the free central placentation. Then we move on to talk about pollination in plants. Pollination is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther of a stamen to the receptive part of the carpel, the stigma. That is the transfer. Pollination is the transfer of pollens to the stigma of the same flower or another flower of a closely related species. It's just about reproduction. Pollination is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther. You have pollen grains in the anther, that's the male reproductive system, to the female reproductive system, which is the stigma. of either the same flower or of another flower that is of a closely related species. Then we have two types of pollination. We have self-pollination and cross-pollination. In self-pollination, mature pollen grains are transferred to the stigma of the same flower or to the stigma of another flower on the same plant. So in self-pollination, it has to do with reproduction on that same plant, either of the same flower or of another flower on that same plant. It has to be that same plant. So the pollen grains from the anther of a particular flower falling on the stigma of that same flower. You know, on a plant, you don't have just one flower. You can have, let's say we have 5 flowers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the same plant. So self-pollination is either on flower 1, the anthers of flower 1 is falling on the stigma of flower 1 of that same plant, or the anthers of flower 1 falling on anthers of flower 3 or on stigma of flower 3 of that same plant, but it's still within the same plant. That is what we call self-pollination. And self-pollination occurs in pea plants. It also occurs in cotton. Also, you find it happening in tomato. So those are plants that often undergo self-pollination. Look at this illustration. You see the crossing of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of the same flower. This is of the same flower. Some is of different flower, but it's still on that same plant. Then cross-pollination. Mature pollen grains from the anthers of a flower are transferred to the stigma of another closely related plant of the same species. The same species is very important. Even though the pollen grains are from a particular plant or a particular flower, they go to the stigma of another closely related plant of the same species. It may be the same plant, like it's the same type of plant, but it's not the same parent plant. For instance, you have 5 flowers